And then I'm going to share my screen. And then do the usual, can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
That's good then. So thank you very much for coming along to tonight's Knots IoT. Oh, good. And I can hear myself on YouTube, so that is working too. Very unnerving when that happens. So moving along, we've got a code of conduct in place. This is actually stolen from the MVP code of conduct, but being as an MVP and I'm running a meetup, I'm allowed to use it. But it's basically summarized as just be nice to everybody. But if anybody has anything that they want to raise, then just send me a chat or a DM on Twitter, and I'll deal with it. We don't want anybody to feel as though they're uncomfortable at any of these meetups. So do be nice to each other and get in touch if there's anything you need to raise. So normally at this point, I'd be telling you that we'd be thanking Rebel, a recruitment company in Nottingham, for the sponsorship. They'd normally be buying the food and supplying us with a place to sit down. But being as they're not giving us either of those two things at the moment, then they're not currently sponsoring. And the only thing that needs sponsoring at the moment is the Zoom license. So I've gone ahead and bought that through my company, and that's why PJG Creations is in the center there. We are still sponsored by JetBrains and also Stickers. If you've not heard of JetBrains, then they make developer tools for developers. And Stickers, they're a really great sticker making company who supply us with our stickers, which you also currently can't have. So there is a JetBrains license available for tonight, like most meetups seem to be able to do. So if you just go ahead and tweet on the Knots IoT hashtag, then at some point in the next couple of days, I'll draw a random person out, and you will win a single license for something like ReSharper or WebStorm or PHP Storm, any of those sorts of tools. So that's all good. Tonight we've got Jon Skeet talking about his experiences hacking his MIDI drum kit, so that's going to be fab. And also Dave Stapley. Am I pronouncing that right, by the way? Is it Stapley?
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah, good. Talking about his experiences building Johnny 5 that you can see in behind him. So two fantastic talks. And in fact, both of these people will be talking directly from their sheds. So we have a good theme for that. Coming up next month's Knots IoT, we've got a Microsoft IoT special. So we've got the senior program manager and the principal program manager from Microsoft's Azure IoT team coming along to talk. Well, not literally, of course, it'll be virtual like everything is. I don't quite know what they're going to talk about, but obviously, being as they're running the team over there, it's going to be interesting to hear what they've got to say. So do join us. We'll be back to our regular Thursday for that. So yeah, look out for the details of that when that pops in. At the end of this month, and in fact, that's what's that? 2 weeks' time almost. We've got .NET Knots. We've got Dylan Beattie and Layla Porter coming to that. So two fantastic speakers there too. We've also got one of my co-hosts of the Agile Engineering podcast, Liam Gulliver. He organises DevOps Knots, and they've got Martin Woodward from Microsoft and Michael Gillette coming on to talk. That's in a couple of weeks' time too. And I just mentioned it, the Agile Engineering podcast. If you're interested in Agile Engineering at all, then do go and check that out. We're on all the major platforms. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen and switch over to Jon Skeet, who will start talking about his drum kit. So thank you very much.
Hello, folks. Let me just see whether I can spotlight myself just to make things simpler. No, I can't. If you could spotlight me, Pete.
I can. Yep.
That'd be great. Cool. So I have dropped the PowerPoint for tonight because I've done this talk a few times and found that I get confused by myself doing the PowerPoint things. And also on Zoom, I find if you've got someone screen sharing all the time, it gets a bit dull because you can't see any of their facial expressions. So I'll switch between sharing my screen and not. I will try to keep an eye on the chat for questions. I think Pete is going to do so as well, but definitely ask questions during rather than saving them for later. I'm hoping to speak for not more than an hour or so, partly because my family is cooking dinner at the moment. So one of the nice things about presenting on Zoom, as opposed to at a conference or even coming up to Nottingham, which I certainly still hope to do at some point in the future, is it makes it very much easier for me to show you my drum kit, which is there. So this is a Roland TD27 module, and I'll see if I can just, trouble is the module is hiding. So I'll have to describe the module. But most of it was a TD17 KVX, and it's got a TD27 module and snare drum and digital ride. Digital snare drum, digital ride. I say this to sort of partly bring up the subject of money, that none of this stuff is particularly cheap, and the way that I got into it was kind of interesting. So I'm a member of our junior church band, and this is every time I move the webcam, it always ends up badly adjusted afterwards. I'm a member of the junior church band in our church, which is badly named because most of us aren't in junior church. And a friend of mine, Alice, is the drummer. And one day I was saying, oh, that looks a lot of fun. I wonder if I've got space in my shed for a drum kit. At which point Alice said, yeah, I'm sure you have. Yeah, go for it, go for it. So we stand in a music shop and I'm faced with two drum kits. One is the Roland TD1 DMK. Perfectly good kit for a beginner, about 450, 500 pounds, I think. Would have been absolutely fine. Its module is relatively simple, and I think it's got 12 kits in, and I'll explain what that means later on. And a bunch of instruments. You can configure a bit. You can say, no, I want a different cymbal on that ride cymbal or whatever. But then there was the TD17, which has, and in fact, I can show you that module, seeing as I, like Blue Peter, I've got one spare almost. So this is a TD17, and this one was, in fact, yeah, effectively my first kit. And it looks a bit more professional than, it's about twice the size of the TD1, and it's got a lot more knobs and buttons. So this is a little screen here, sort of 3-line LCD screen, and it's got a little central wheel bit, and around that it's got click, coach, song, enter, exit, up and down, drum kit, and then there are buttons for assign and level and tuning and muffling, and this gives the impression of being more capable. Both of them have MIDI inputs, but my guess, well, I'm fairly sure you can do significantly less with the TD1 than with the TD17. I didn't know that at the time when I bought it, but I kind of made an assumption, because the salesperson in the shop was very good at doing his job, and he upsold me the TD17 in a sort of, well, if you buy the TD1, then in a year you might think I want something more. If you buy the TD17, then that will last you for years and years. Little did he know that the TD27 would come out and I would then get hankering after that. But he didn't know my personality, which is always the upgrade. But what I saw when he showed me what you could do with the drum kit, I immediately started imagining an application. And the reason is, the TD17 and TD27 are very, very, very configurable. So the one module, which is the physical bit, contains effectively 100 virtual drum kits. So it's as if, suppose you're gigging, which I never do because I'm a terrible drummer. You might want to do one song with a sort of jazz style drum kit, one song with a heavy metal style, one song with a hybrid kind of thing, one song just on cowbells, etc. So the idea is you can preset all these drum kits so that on some kits, the snare sounds like a steel snare drum, on some sounds like a maple snare drum, on some, when you hit the snare, it might sound like a cowbell. And I keep coming back to cowbells just because I like them. So you can choose the instrument, and then you can choose the tuning and muffling. So you can say, okay, well, this maple snare drum that you've configured. Well, I want it to act as if you've got various bits of muffling on, muffling level 3, because real drummers do muffle their kits a bit for, whatever reason to suit the space they're in. And, maybe it's a slightly smaller drum than the standard snare drum, so it would have a slightly higher sound, so you can adjust the tuning of it as well. And then you can just all kinds of different things. Say that it's got a slightly deeper shell depth. And then you start applying the sort of effects that you would think more for electric guitars. So you've got reverb, auto wah and things, and I'll demonstrate just a couple of those later on. But the point is that this sales guy was really good at showing, hey, there's huge amounts to configure here. And I was thinking, yeah, there are. And I've got a 3-line LCD screen and a bunch of weird buttons. I know a better way of configuring things. It's called a computer. So I imagined, and it was quite astonishing this, I imagined the app that I will now present. So let me just share my screen and just start the application. And it will all make a little bit more sense. I'll show you what it can do and then explain some of the tech bits behind it. But don't sort of focus on the tech things. There are a few things that I think are interesting points of WPF development. But the main point of today's talk, I should have said at the start, is really not to talk about drums at all, or at least it's not for you to get enthused about drums. So I'm just going to load a preset file of my TD27. I don't care whether you like drums or not at the end of this. I don't want you particularly to go out and buy a Roland drum kit. If you do and want to play with the V-Drum Explorer, that's great. What I do want you to do, and hopefully this will be in common with Dave's talk as well, is just think it's lots of fun doing a personal project. And I bet each of you has a personal project that either you've never started because you've thought, oh, that would take a bit too much time, or I don't quite know where to start, or you've had one and put it down and never quite got back to it because it's a bit of an investment to go back to it. So today I'm banging the drum, pun definitely intended, for personal projects, do some open source hacking and make the most of it. So as well as I do use this, the application, so it has genuine purpose and other people actually use it too. So, number one, I've built something useful. Number two, I have learnt significant amounts about WPF and a few C# techniques along the way as well. Experimented with nullable reference type things, found odd little corner cases, etc. I've got a great topic to blog about, and I need to get back and write some more blog posts about this. And I get to present it to good folks like yourselves. So all of this, I'm trying to get this one thing of drumming, and there's, it's really quite fun drumming as well. I'm trying to get all of them to riff off each other and get as much value as I can. I mentioned that the cheaper drum kit was 450, 500 pounds. The more expensive one, well, there was one model at 1200, which I bought at the time, but I later bought a slightly more expensive one and then upgraded it. It's not a cheap hobby, so let's get as much value for money as we can out of it. And I bet I get as much value from my Roland drum kit as anyone who just plays it on it for drums. So here's the application that hopefully you can all see. Let me just move the screen sharing thing out the way. So you can see we have 100, oh, there we go, 100 kits here. And in each of these kits, we've got the triggers, which are the different aspects of the drum heads. So, most of these have a head and a rim. So I'm not going to move the camera again, but I can actually show you, because I happen to have a spare one lying around. I will stop screen share briefly. Dum, dum, dum. So each, this is a spare tom, and it has the rim and the head. And then it has a little phono socket that it plugs into the module with. So these are each, fairly high-tech things actually, and particularly the digital snare is very high-tech. It's got sort of some interesting sensors for if you've got your hand just over it so that you can do cross-stick techniques. But importantly, you can then configure the head and the rim separately. And on the ride, there are actually 3 bits. There's the head, which is most of it, the rim around the edge, and then the bell, the little dome at the very top of it. And you can set each of these to be a different instrument. So we can see that the ride head is a traditional medium thin ride. The ride rim is traditional medium thin ride edge, and the bell similarly. This is, you know, a jazz thing. It's a relatively straightforward kit. If we go to something like the Electro Drums, we'll see quite different things going on here. So we've got some analog toms, we've got some noise. So if you hit the tom 1 rim, we'll just get some noise. I might as well. So this is kit 53. Let's see if we can hear that. So if I hit the head of tom 1, that is supposedly analog tom 3. But you can hear there's just sort of white noise, and that was tom 2 rim, which was the ratchet noise. So you get all these kinds of different instruments. So I'd imagine this sort of UI of a big tree view where you can then edit and say, well, I don't want it to be a plugged kick with an underlying Melbourne kick, and I don't know whether Melbourne should have a double L or not. I want it to be, well, what's it going to be? Frankly, it's always going to be a cowbell, and we've got, you know, 7 different cowbell, more than 7 different cowbells and things. And I could then copy that data back to the drum kit and play it, or I could just save it in a file so that I can have my whole library of drum kits. And this is what I imagined at the time. However, I had absolutely no idea how I would get it to work. So I'm going to stop sharing again to talk at you instead of demonstrating. Let's talk a little about MIDI. So I was aware of MIDI before as a standard for playing instruments and recording instruments. You can probably just about see I have a digital piano in the background, which I have plugged into my computer. I know that it does do MIDI stuff. I have written code to effectively be a MIDI proxy. So whenever I press a key on the piano, it actually sends that signal to the drum kit and plays a drum, or vice versa. You can send it in either direction. So most uses of MIDI are via very standardized things that say, you know, oh, look, you've played middle C and you've played it with a given attack. So, you know, how hard you've hit the note. And the different drum pads have different MIDI notes associated with them. And then there's things like changing the volume and changing and, you know, silencing all the notes. That's all relatively standard, boring MIDI. The MIDI that I needed to use to do the app that you've just seen, to anytime I need to suck the data off the kit or squirt it back into the kit, is with something called system exclusive messages, SysX. And the idea of SysX is there is one SysX message which isn't really SysX, because it is a standard, and it's basically, please identify yourself, dear instrument at the other end of the cable. But all the other SysX things are meant to be brand specific. So they're sort of messages that you can say, oh, this is a Roland SysX of a particular type versus a Yamaha SysX, and they could share the same number, but because you know, oh, I've detected that I'm talking to a Roland device, so I can use the Roland SysX messages. So this is all documented, and I'll show you a little bit of documentation. This is documentation which isn't for the a drum kit, but which I'll show you later on. And you can see this is a schema, and of course with mirroring that won't be terribly readable probably. But this is a schema for where all the configuration is. And it's as if you've got a big block of memory that, or one big file that's got all of the configuration. and the schema tells you where each bit is within memory. And the sysx commands that are available are data request and data set. Now, data request basically says, tell me what's at, tell me the 100 bytes starting at position 5 or something like that. And then you send that down your MIDI output connection. And then, if you're lucky, down your MIDI input connection comes a command, which is the data set command that says, here are 100 bytes starting at byte 5. Now, that's not actually a response, because MIDI 1.0 doesn't have the idea of request and response. It just has unidirectional messages. And it so happens that I've got 2 channels, 1 input and 1 output. And that when I send a message on the output, I get back a message on the input. But other things could be sending the messages on the input as well at the same time. If I go and twiddle my drum kit to select a different kit, that would be sending MIDI messages to my application, and my application would be happily ignoring them. But that would be sending the same kind of data set of, here's some data. And it's that same command that I send if I want to tell the, if I edit, say, kit 2 to rename it, and then I want to tell the drum kit, hey, I've renamed this, I would send down a data set, right, here's a bunch of data starting at whatever. So it's both a reply and a command in its own right, if you see what I mean. And it's sort of, it's either, here's a reply to something you've asked for, here's just a stream of changed data, and I want you to change your data, and those all 3 use the same data set thing. Now, the next interesting bit, I found that relatively, it took me a little bit. I initially asked on forums saying, how do I communicate with the drum kit? Is there any way to get the configuration data off? And you can use an SD card and copy the kit data. And I started doing that. I thought this is going to be quite boring. And then I found someone said, oh, you might be able to do something with sysx messages. I found the MIDI implementation document, and then started looking into it more and realized that sysx was the way to go. However, I then ended up with the next problem, which is Roland's decision to use what I call 7-bit addressing. So MIDI has this interesting feature where its communication channels are 7 bits because the top bit is used for signaling. So I think you start every command with the top bit set, and you finish every command with a byte that's got the top bit set, and everything in between is data, which, works. It's fine. It's very annoying when you try to represent data types that are bigger than 7 bits. So the notional address space that's as written in the documentation is, I'm trying to just check whether it's 32 or 64 bit. It's 32 bits of address space. Now, they use 4 bytes to send that down, and if the top bit has to be clear on each byte, then you've got 28 bits to play with. Yeah. So we could, and I think it would be logical to say, okay, I will write the documentation with 28 bits of address space, 28 contiguous bits, so that you go from sort of 7F to 80 and then up to FF, and then it goes to 100, the same way that normal counting works. And to some extent, you could see that that's one implementation, but the documentation seems to think, no, we'll treat this as a 32-bit wide address space where the 8th bit of each byte is always clear. So the addresses in the documentation go from 7F to 100. Literally, if you've got 2 fields next to each other, then one could be at 7F, and in fact, it could be a 2-byte field, and the 2 bytes are at 7F and 100, and then there's the next one. I mention this because it was a challenge for the first 2 versions of my VDrum Explorer. I initially wrote this in Windows Forms, and then I ported that, and that was very control generational, let's say. So every time I move to a different page, there are lots of different controls being shown because there's huge amounts of data. And I rapidly decided this needed to be kind of schema based, that I didn't want to hard code a class for kit and a class for instrument and a class for trigger and things. Instead, this would all be based on a schema. And one of the reasons for doing that is that there are multiple drum kits that are supported by the VDrum Explorer, the TD17, the TD27, and the TD50, which is the sort of high-end one. So I was talking about price earlier on. Buying a new TD50 whole drum kit, you're talking about spending 6, 7, 8 grand. These are not cheap things. I would still like to get hold of a TD50 module, just the module bit, so that I could play around with VDrum Explorer. But even just the module is £1,000 if you're very, very lucky getting a second-hand one, or sort of 2.5 grand new. So I probably won't end up being able to justify doing that. But they all have similar but slightly different schema. And I thought, well, if I can represent those differences just in JSON files and make the whole UI schema driven, then I don't need to have whole different classes for the different drum kits involved. Great. So the WinForms would generate all the controls itself. You literally, an event that says, okay, you've clicked on a tree view item, said, all right, okay, in that case, clear whatever's on the right-hand part of the page, the details panel, as it were, and generate it all based on the schema. And that was kind of horrible and really quite slow. And I ported that to WPF, at which point it was a bit faster, but definitely not the way that WPF's meant to be written. No view models at all. I was just populating controls and hooking up their events. And it also meant that when things changed, making one control react to another was really hard. Now, WPF normally makes that really easy via data binding and I notify change, property change and things, but that's all around the view models, which, as I say, I wasn't doing. So earlier this year, probably about February or so, I started the rewrite of the WPF one, I had both projects available at the same time so that I could work on them both and copy bits over. And I recently, in fact, it was Monday night, maybe even yesterday, last night, I finally released Alpha 100 Alpha 6, which is the first public release using the new way of doing the WPF. But that was also the first time, this code base is the first one that I haven't been annoyed by 7-bit addressing all over the place. Instead, I've got one place which knows about this addressing, and everything else is aware that there's logical addressing and display addressing. So logical is the sort of compact 28-bit version, and then it sort of spreads out so that we can display the values as they're in the documentation and parse them in the opposite direction as well. Let's dive into a little bit of the code. So I will screen share again. And look at how I've organized things. So one of the points of this was not just to get something that worked, but I wanted to explore, well, what does it mean to write a WPF app in a nicely organized way? I found that there were very few articles written post 2010, and a lot of them didn't seem to include the bits of how do I work with a view model that I was particularly interested in. For example, there's one oddity, which I think is visible in Data Explorer. Almost everything is command bound, which is the way you're meant to do things with WPF. So if I look in Data Explorer, I can see that, right, so I've got some buttons here, hopefully you can see the XAML here, and almost everything is in XAML. My my view classes are almost empty, but not quite. I'll explain why in a minute. But I've got edit commands and commit commands and cancel edit commands, and those are all taken from the data context. So the data context can say, hey, this is you can't edit at the moment, or you can, once you start editing, you can either commit or you can cancel, but you can't click on edit again. And the view model takes care of all those properties, getting the right things and telling the view to enable and disable things. And I don't need to handle any click events manually in the view code, except when it comes to tree view. For some reason, the tree view selected item changed. You can't do as a command. And I have to say, I found all of the commanding descriptions in WPF really circular. It was clear that the tutorials were all written by people who understood it and thought that after you read what, their article, you would understand it as well. And I suspect anyone who already understood it would read the article and say, yes, that's a great article, really explains clearly what commanding is all about. Unfortunately, it didn't help me not knowing about commanding to start with. And I wonder whether that's partly the age of the age of the articles, that we may be a little bit better at explaining things now. And in particular, our thinking around how you write code has come along in the last 10 years. And I look forward to, now that WPF is available on .NET Core, it's getting a bit of a new lease of life. It's safe to write WPF. You're not about to find that it's not supported on .NET 5, for example. But I did find that tree view selected item changed, I needed to handle via the view. But almost none of the views have much other code. So Explorer Home has nothing. The Instrument Audio Explorer, I realize I haven't shown you most of these views. Play Audio. Oh, Play Audio, that's a list box. I believe that's effectively the same problem. That's for selection has changed on the list box. The second list box, I should think. Here we go. Selection changed equals Play Audio. And also mouse double click. So it's kind of interesting. There are those 2 bits that can't be handled by the view model. But I found other things that didn't really fit in with the whole view model way of doing things either, which is when you want the UI to do something really particular, you can't represent in the view model, please open a file picker, whether to save or to open a file. That's just not really a view model concern. Well, except that the view model, if you've got a command that says load file, you really do want to open a picker at that point. But within the view model, you can't, you shouldn't have access to any of the view specific things. So the way I tackled this, which isn't necessarily the right way, but it seems to have worked so far and leads to testable code, I won't say tested, I'll come back to that, is I have this iView services. This is in the view model, and I'm sure I could have, I don't know why I've got an import for com types up there, get rid of that quickly. This is everything that the view model needs to call back to the view to say, please open this now. And they're pretty much all from dialogues. So open and save file, obviously, but also opening the different views, moving from one view to another. Unless it's possible that if I were doing a WPF pages idea, which seems to have kind of gone away a bit. And yeah, people are talking about Silverlight in the chat. Yes. Silverlight, and then Windows mobile apps all had this sort of page idea, and you transition from one page to another. Yeah, I like just Windows. Windows are easy. I can have 2 windows open. That's fine. So I want to be able to show these different explorers. And yes, I've called everything an explorer. Oh well. So a kit explorer or a module explorer. and this will open a new window, and there's no way I can really do that without the view knowing how to do it. So I have this simple interface, and then the implementation is also, so this is in view code, but it is really quite simple. And I definitely wanted to keep this simple because I don't know how I would test this. As in test the view code itself. I would have to hook it up to some sort of UI testing framework that can tell when you've opened a new window, etc. And I see Peter's commenting in the chat. I ended up creating user controls to encapsulate stuff that I couldn't hook up directly to my view model. I would be interested to see what exactly that works. I'm struggling to get my head exactly around it. But yeah, being able to show and hide stuff from the view model, it's not a normal view model concern. And sooner or later, you've got to say, I want to create a new window. And creating a new view isn't something that a view model should do. But it can ask the view to do it on its behalf. So, yeah, I've got this pattern of show a particular kind of explorer given its view model. And maybe I should have a show window with a particular kind of view model, and then the view could decide which view to show. But hey, I mentioned that this was testable. It is almost completely untested. I have a test project here for viewModel.test, and this is the single test that's in it. And yep, that is just the template test. I've got in the model test package, I do actually have a few more reasonable tests. So if I can't even remember what notify change recorder is now, but oh, that's to help me for testing some other things, in fact. But I do have a very, very few tests. I will at some point maybe, and commented out tests because the architecture changed and I didn't want to change all the tests. This is one of the reasons I've got so few tests. With hobby projects, you tend to move much, much quicker than you can in professional life. And that's a blessing and a curse. It means that the code hasn't been reviewed by anyone else, and it doesn't have tests because it would take too long to then change the tests when I change the architecture. I'm now pretty comfortable with the architecture. Now is a good time. One Saturday, I might think, do you know, I don't have any new features to add. I will just write some tests for the architecture that I've got. However, I'm really pretty pleased with it. I'd like to move on from the WPF app to showing you something rather sillier, or two other sillier things. So because I've got a model, and the view model is fairly tightly coupled to the view, not sort of in the same assembly coupled, but it's definitely, the view models are for those particular views. But I have a couple of other projects here, in particular the console app, and this has a bunch of different commands. And if I open a Windows terminal, everything takes longer when Zoom's running, partly just because of the law of, hey, you're presenting, of course it'll be slower, but also partly because Zoom is taking so much CPU. So if I just run .NET Run, this is using Project Dragonfruit, or at least system.command line in some fashion or other. I'm not sure that it's using all the binding bits. Wow, this is taking a very long time. But there are a bunch of things that I like to be able to do from console. And I often use console applications as a way of testing interactions with the drum kit. So I don't like the idea of, I need to test whether something will work or not. I will create a button in a UI and just make that button call something. Like, the overhead of creating user interface is huge compared with in a console app. Even a reasonably flexible console app. Oh, finally it's worked. It's lovely to be able to just check things as I go. And I often don't remove the commands afterwards. So if I run list kits now, this is communicating with the, well, it will show that it's detected that it's got a TD27. Currently, I don't support having more than one Roland supported device plugged in at the same time, and it would have bought if I had the TD17 in at the same time. But you can see it's found the TD27 and it's got all the kit names from the module. There's one useful thing that I've got that's Turn Pages Note, and I will demonstrate this on this screen. But you may or may not remember when I showed you the module, showed you the drum kit, there's a monitor on the wall. And in fact, I only mounted that today because the drum kit was over there last week and there was a table that a monitor stand could be on. But I've got a couple of these little portable monitors and they're great. So having run this Turn Pages Note, this application is now listening for a particular MIDI note. And this means if I open up, oh, I've got to find it now. I'm sure it should be on there. If I find the drum music, sheet music, Living on a Prayer. There we go. So this is the song that I have been practicing, and no, I'm not going to start playing it live. But the sheet music comes so that it works really well to give a 2-page view. So imagine that you're playing along and in page display, full screen. Oh, it's somewhere. Full screen mode, I think. Yeah. Okay. So I'm playing Living on a Prayer and I get to the end of page 2. Quite obviously, I want to go to page 3 at this point. So I will I'll see if I can. I can't easily have focus on the. So let's move the make Living on a Prayer just a single page at a time for the moment. That's just the right-hand side so that we can see the console app as well. Page display, single page view. So on my drum kit, I have an extra bar trigger, which isn't like a normal drum. It's just a little bit of rubber effectively, and that I got specifically for this purpose. So that when I hit that, so I'm bashing away on Living on a Prayer, and then I hit the bar trigger, and it should. Dum, dum, dum. Okay, I'm now just plain confused. I had really expected that to, let me see whether Crash 2 does it instead. No. Okay, I need to work out why that's not working. But normally, and in the past it definitely has worked, I think I've plugged something into the wrong place. That should be changing the page just by hitting a drum. And of course, I would want to probably tune what instrument that drum was playing so that it was either silent or something that I want to play at the end of the page anyway. But my point is, it's actually useful being able to do all of this. So the console app is great for me experimenting and also provides genuinely useful things. But I want to show you something a bit sillier. So about probably a month ago, I was in one of these talks. I can't remember who I was talking to now. And someone mentioned, did you know there's a web MIDI API? So this is a JavaScript API for accessing MIDI via a browser. It's like, oh, no, I did not know that. Okay, that's interesting. And someone said, and you know how you can call JavaScript from .NET, right? You use Blazor. And thus began a descent into strange times, which I actually blogged about in a way I thought it would be interesting. I would try it for one weekend and I would blog when I was doing stuff so you could see how long it was taking me to experiment. If I went down a went down a rat hole somewhere, you could see that. If you read the blog post, which is on, let me put I don't have the full link with me, but it's on codeblog.jonskeet.uk. I think I've only written a couple of blog posts since, so you can find it easily enough on there, along with all the other VDrum stuff. The hardest thing in doing any of this code was getting base64 encoding and decoding to work in JavaScript. Would you believe it? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But by the end of the weekend, I had a Blazor project, which you can see here, and it doesn't do a huge amount, I'll be honest, but we've got a Razor page. Okay, so it's got some description and then a button and a few status things and then a log of messages. And then code behind that, again, there's not very much code behind. That sort of does a bit of initialization. And then when we click list kits, do you remember I had that console app that listed the kits? Well, it basically had the same kind of code as here, but talking to a console. And you can see there's really not much code here that is, you know, this isn't business logic code. This is just, I will go over however many kits there are and list them. And let me show you that working, given that we have the, this will probably be quite slow because of Zoom. And because it's, you know, Blazor being, I think it's still interpreted, I think. So if I go to vdrumexplorer.jonskeet.uk, and one thing that I have done post the weekend, this is now served off my Kubernetes engine cluster. But if anyone else has one of these drum kits, you can go to this page too, and you should be able to list the kits on your drum module. There we go. If we hit list kits, ooh, request MIDI access is not a function. I've seen this before if I haven't given it permission for some reason. And why have I not? Oh, I know. It only works over HTTPS. I think the idea is it's too dangerous allowing you access to MIDI devices via HTTP. So there we go. Right, so now it's managed to initialize MIDI. Do you remember the log that we saw with the console of how it was detecting the devices? Well, I haven't had to write that code again. It's the same code and it's going to logs either in Blazor or in the console. And here it goes listing the kits. So in order to get that working, one of the tasks over the weekend was to abstract out what do I need from MIDI. And let me show you the MIDI sort of reverse dependency idea. So everything is in vdrumexplorer.model. So I've got an audio interface and a MIDI interface. The audio interface is for recording and playing back instruments. But basically for MIDI, I need a MIDI manager, which lets you list input and output devices. And these MIDI input device and MIDI output device classes are just really straightforward ones. And then open a MIDI input device to get an iMIDI input and open an output to get an iMIDI output. The input just has, well, tell me when you receive a MIDI message, and the output has send a MIDI message. Really, really, really straightforward. This is obviously a pretty low-level MIDI interface. There are far higher level ones that do all kinds of stuff, but I don't need those. I can build everything up based on just this. So then I don't do anything with raw MIDI myself. I don't have any device drivers. Instead, I used managed MIDI, which is a lovely little library that someone's put together. I don't know their name, unfortunately. And you can see, you know, there's not a lot of code here because I'm really just putting a veneer over what they've already done. Likewise, MIDI input, you know, I change from their MIDI received event tags to my MIDI message. And I think MIDI output is even simpler. Yeah, you know, if you get a MIDI message, then turn it into raw bytes and squirt that down the channel. Okay, so that's if you're running on desktop, you use this implementation. If you're running on web MIDI, Then I've got, again, written in C#. This is just plain C#. It's in the same project as the Blazor actual view, but doesn't need to be. So I've got a bunch of C# code and then a very small amount of JavaScript, because I tried to keep the amount of JavaScript as small as possible because I don't do JavaScript. And all of this is on GitHub. Another thing to put, github.com/jskeet/demo code. It's under drums if you do want to look at that. So, this is the entirety of this MIDI file. There's really not a lot of it, as you can see. And by just abstracting out that MIDI interface, that made listing the kits just really, really simple, because it's exactly the same code, just going over that interface. Now, where this got particularly silly, I'm going to stop screen sharing now. Where that got even sillier was because my my drum kit supports Bluetooth, and supports Bluetooth for audio, but also Bluetooth MIDI. And my phone supports Bluetooth MIDI. So I was able to pair the two. I had to run some kind of weird proxy thing that I don't actually know details of. I don't fully understand the proxying of MIDI things, but run a little app. And then I could just go onto Chrome and visit vdrumexplorer.jonskeet.uk, and then I would have C# code running in a browser on a phone, talking over the Web MIDI JavaScript API over Bluetooth to my drum kit, and list all the kits. And if that isn't just the most ridiculous thing of, that stack should not work. Okay. So that's one thing that I got after one user group of someone happening to mention Blazor and Web MIDI. I should now introduce you, just at the end before I completely finish, to the other thing that I've started picking up, which is called an Aerophone. I've so far talked entirely about drum kits, and I'm not a drummer, but even I know that this is not a drum kit. Okay, I think we can probably all agree this is not a drum kit. This is what's called an Aerophone, and I deliberately went onto the Roland website and looked at all the instruments that they sell, which is quite a few keyboards and a few drum kits, a few amps and stuff. But also, just there are 3 different Aerophones. There's this one, there's a diddy little one about the size of a recorder, which I'm kind of interested in, but not for reasons. It doesn't support the protocol that I need. And one MIDI-sized one called the Aerophone Go. But this is the original Aerophone, a couple of years old. But what I was looking for from any of these instruments was something that supported the same configuration protocol as the drum kit. So even though this is a saxophone, although it can also be, and it takes far too long to switch between these, but just like you can play, you can turn those drums into cowbells, etc. I can turn the Aerophone into a pipe organ. There's configuration there. In each of the studio sets, as they're called, there are 4 different instruments layered on top of each other, and it's the same protocol with a few differences. It's not all quite working properly, but I just thought that's so much fun. How could I possibly resist it? And I saw it at the start of the day, and I resisted for the whole morning and a bit of the early afternoon, I think, before ordering one of these. And again, these aren't cheap. And I want to mention just before I end about privilege. So I suspect that everyone here is privileged because we're in the tech industry and it's a well-paid industry. I feel immensely privileged that I've got enough somewhat disposable income. I'm not rich. I can't just throw thousands here and there, but I could afford to buy the drum kit and then upgrade it, buy the Aerophone, spend enough time to do all this building, spend enough time to write blog posts and things. And then I do think that it's a privilege that, Pete can say, would you like to come and talk at .NET Knots? Or Knots IoT, and me say, yep, we'll work out later on what I talk about. And I can say, can I talk about my drum kit? It's the most silly thing. And it's a real privilege that the answer is, yeah, of course. And I'm aware that, you know, if Pete hadn't heard of me, hadn't seen me talk before, we'd not be in this position. So the levels of privilege involved in putting together everything you've seen today are quite spectacular. And I say that partly to remind myself. So when you're thinking about your hobby project, remind yourself of what privileges that might entail, and put yourself in other people's shoes, and hey, hopefully help some other people along the way. That's kind of all I wanted to show you. I've missed out a bunch of the things I normally show just because I started finding them less interesting. But I hope you've got an idea of how much fun it is and how daft the things I've been doing are. And, you know, I'm far from done, but I just keep on finding extra things to do. And I've had so much fun. And I would strongly urge you, yeah, okay, it's Wednesday. I've got today and Friday off, so I can actually do a bit more hacking on this. You're probably at work. But what are you doing this weekend? Don't sort of say to yourself, I need to have the whole weekend or it's not worth starting. But can you carve out, can you decide tonight a 2-hour block of time? Maybe it's that you'll get up at 7 in the morning and have 2 hours before 9 o'clock and take your husband or wife a cup of coffee or whatever it is. But, you know, instead of having a lie-in, you'll have 2 hours just hacking around on something fun. I would love to think that, you know, maybe half of you could think of something that you could just do with hacking. Maybe write that blog post that you've been thinking of writing for ages. And it is so much fun to do. Yeah, I've really enjoyed doing this, and I do think it's helped my professional life as well. I mentioned Zoom earlier on. Very final thing, I promise. I mentioned in the chat earlier on, I run our church's services on Zoom, as in I switch between different people and different videos. Now, if any of you have run Zoom meetings and needed to present 5 different videos, you'll know that the screen sharing is not as simple as it could be, in that in order to start playing a video, you have to say share screen, then choose, do I want motion audio or motion video or not? Do I want to share my computer's sound? Okay, which screen am I going to share? Okay, I've started sharing the screen. Now I'll bring up the video and start playing the video. And all of this while people are waiting. I found there was a Zoom SDK and I thought I can automate all of this. And sure enough, I've now got a little Zoom application written in WPF using the skills I have built up from doing the drums. And now there are 3 of us using this Zoom and Enhance, I call it, that lets you spotlight people easily and mute everyone and unmute people when Zoom allows you to, and just switch between things. And it's so handy. Little features like we have people come in on the phone, because you can call into Zoom calls from a regular telephone, and those show up as their phone number. Well, that's not much use to the other members of our congregation who would like to say hi to their friends. But if you've got an SDK that tells you when people join, you can just say, okay, well, I've got a dictionary of string to string saying, when I see anyone on this list, rename them to the corresponding name on this list. All kinds of little features. And I would not have done any of this if I hadn't done the drum stuff before, because I'd have thought, oh, WPF, it's ages since I've done any WPF. I wouldn't know where to start. So that really is testimony to it has practical benefits as well as being huge amounts of fun. With that, you've all been quite quiet in terms of questions in the chat. So let's throw it open to just wider questions now. I'm going to cancel the spotlight so we can be on sort of on gallery view or speaker view if you want, just so that we see more people.
Firstly, thank you very much. That was awesome.
Thanks.
It's really interesting, and definitely I can echo John's sentiment of do hack, do your own projects. I think probably if you're of a certain age, that's probably how we started programming. Actually, yeah. we had a Commodore 64 or a ZX Spectrum, and we were typing in stuff or creating our own bits or modifying things. And I think that's kind of got lost a little bit with the iPad age because people don't have access so much. But things like Scratch,
Raspberry Pis.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So that was why Eben Upton created the Raspberry Pi, was to do exactly that. He was a BBC micro guy, even more privileged. Must have been. They were a fortune. But yeah, definitely. Yeah. So any questions for Jon? Oh, bamboozled them.
Oh, do go and so things I didn't talk about were building a Windows installer, getting hold of an Authenticode signing signature certificate thing, and yet more money, and writing documentation. But there are all those things, so you could install it just straight from an MSI, or clone the code. I think I've included a TD17 module file, so you could, even without a drum kit there at all, you can still play around with it, and you won't know what anything sounds like, but you could see what you would be able to do on a TD17.
Your issue that you had with the tree view, was that where you had to put it in the view class in the code behind?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a bit of a pain. Some of the stuff. I
researched, and nearly asked a Stack Overflow question, but found there were other ones already that were asking this. And some people have, using triggers and all kinds of more advanced WPF things, have worked out hacks, but they ended up being about 100 lines of code, whereas I could just put a one-line method in the view code behind. And I thought, well, that's a trade-off I'm willing to make. That's fine.
Yeah, I mean, I think MVVM doesn't say you can't have no code in your code behind. It just means when you do that, it becomes hard to test it. Yeah. So have the minimum, and it has to be directly related to the view. And I think that passes all of those tests, doesn't it? Perfectly fine. I mentioned user controls, and I just encapsulated controls like a tree view and put it into a user control, put a XAML in there, and a user control's got its own code behind. And then you can raise events from that, and you can have
I see. Yeah,
dependency properties in there, and you can set properties that way. And it kind of just feels a little bit more WPF-y to do it that way. But for one item, it's not even worth it.
Right.
Just put it in the code behind and move on.
I have used user controls, not in this, but in the Zoom and Enhance. I used to have, so there are various different views effectively. One is the director, which is where you're expected to be most of the time, which has, here are my videos that I'm playing, here are the list of participants and things. And that used to be in a whole separate window. And then I thought, well, if I make the main window a tabbed interface, so I've got sort of meeting details, the director tab, a log tab, a chat tab, and a participants tab, that's fine. And I thought, well, okay, most of the director tab has by far the most XAML in. I quite like to keep it away from everything else. I found that just by having, well, this is a user control, fine, and just the whole of that tab content is a user control. So it was as a unit of not even reuse, but a sort of just separation unit. I'm not sure whether that's how user controls are meant to be used, but it worked.
Yeah, that sounds good. What did you use for your MVVM framework? Did you use anything like MVVM Lite?
Good question. I used nothing at all.
That's what I've done, same thing.
I deliberately, so it's not that I have anything against them. It's that I wanted to be aware if I use the framework, what it would be buying me. And if you don't try doing it without the framework, you don't know how much you're really leaning on stuff that you don't need. So I ended up writing my own view model base and my own delegate command, which I think are two very, very, very simple and they're common in every MVVM package. So a command that is based on a when you execute this command, just run that delegate. So you can use Lambda expressions or method group conversions all over the place. The view model base is mostly so that you can set a property and get the property notification changes. Although I also found one useful thing of noting when there was the first subscriber, so that I could then subscribe to other change notifications. And then when our subscriber unsubscribes, I can unsubscribe from change notifications. It's sort of like dispose, but things aren't disposed as much in WPF. Instead, you get subscriptions and unsubscriptions. So yeah, those were the two things that would have been in a framework if I'd used one, but I definitely don't feel the need to use one.
Did you, for every property, when you change the property, you've got to raise that on notify property change, I think it is, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did you find having to put that line in to every single setter?
It's slightly annoying, so I'll show you.
You'd have thought they'd have fixed that. You know, I've got a property, can I not just decorate it with something that says...
C# 9 or 10, I think they're certainly talking about code generation.
Right.
So if I look in the view model, I also needed to think, should the model itself be raising events? And it does.
Yes.
But there are some people that say, you know, oh no, I notify property change is a view model thing, not a model thing. I decided that that was too much hassle to try to separate things out that way.
I wrote a tiny little VB program that I could copy all of my code behind variables and then just hit a button and it would generate me the properties for them with the raising them and everything.
Let's see. Okay, so I'm trying to find any good examples of this.
I see you've done it with the name of. You've got raise property change.
I have in that. So yes, for when I deliberately raise a property, if I've got one property changing, raises it for multiple things because some are computed, then I'll do. This is a good example, right? So which kit are you going to copy? And it's just a backing field. The getter just gets it, and then set property takes a ref to the field. Okay, I've got some validation here, but you can ignore that. So imagine that just said value, and then that uses the I can't even remember what they're called now. The automatically provided by the compiler bits that do the name of for you. The call a member name. So again, very popular in every MVVM framework, so that I don't need to write name of unless I am specifically raising a different property. Changed. Yeah.
You touched on disposals. Are you using the weak event property handlers or direct property handlers?
I wish I knew what you meant. What I can do is show you my view model base and see if that makes sense.
I've just posted a link.
I will. Cool. I will probably have to have a look at it tomorrow, but
because the bog standard sort of plus equals on delegates, you can get memory leaks, whereas the weak event handlers give some stuff around not having memory leaks.
I've tended to find that the whole memory leaks for event handlers, you definitely can, but I tend to find that so long as you understand where they would come and where they wouldn't come, it's not too bad. But the equivalent here is when I get a so rather than using field-like event, this is a sort of manual event handler. And when when the first event comes in, I then say, okay, I've got some subscribers, so now's a good time for you to subscribe as well. And then when the last one has gone, I'll unsubscribe from everything. So it's not using weak handles in the memory sense. I could definitely still get memory leaks. I happen not to have in this application, and in other applications I might need to use weak events instead.
That's very VB-like syntax. I'm used to that .add handler being used in VB, so I didn't realize it would do that.
So this is just a little helper I've got. So it's just to do make this thread safe.
That's it. Yeah, that's exactly the same pattern as this weak event is .add handler. So you've kind of replicated it.
Right. Well, it's a fairly natural name to give it. But this is just so that you can do plus equals, but remember when it was null beforehand, tell me if I've made it non-null. And in fact, I'm assuming that I check whether I'm actually adding a null handler, in which case it's going to stay null, and that's a no op. Otherwise, remember whether we didn't have any handlers before, subscribe, and then return whether we didn't have any handlers before. And remove handlers, obviously very similar. So none of this is rocket science. I don't believe I have invented any interesting, useful patterns. Or rather, I don't think I've invented anything that anyone else hasn't invented. I have come up with them myself in various cases, but I'm sure so have dozens of other people. I mean, I do like the idea of the view model saying, these are the services that I need the view to supply to me. And then, when you build the view model, the view can say, right, and here's how you call me back when you want to open a save dialog or something like that.
Oh, any other questions, anybody? No? Okay, well, we'll take a 10-minute break so you can go and refill your drinks and go to the toilet and whatever else you need to do. Perhaps wolf down a little bit of dinner. I turned my my webcam off partway through John's talk, and that's exactly what John is going to go and do now. Is
indeed
eat his dinner.
So I hope to see. I will watch Dave's talk at another time, possibly even tomorrow, if it's going to be on YouTube. Yep. Hope you all have a lovely rest of the evening, and thank you very much for having me. Hope you enjoyed it.
Thanks, John.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. Cheers. Yeah, thanks to John. That was fantastic. We'll get 10 minutes. So if we come back at 8:20, then we can get going with Dave's talk, if that works for everybody. Cool. Obviously, you don't have to go. Don't feel as though I'm telling you to go to the toilet. I'm not your dad.
Good time to go and get a cup of tea.
Definitely, yeah.
I will apologise beforehand because it's been horrifically loud here. The rain bouncing off the roof and the thunder's just crazy. My friend's just messaged to say that his router's just blown up.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah. Probably about 2 or 3 miles away.
Oh, my.
Yeah, so it's been really, really bad.
I can't hear it. I can hear you quite well, but I can't hear that.
It's literally just calmed down a bit now, so I was hoping it would calm down a bit. So I'm going to use this opportunity to get mildly soaked and make a good cup of tea.
Yes. Well, if nothing else, you'll cool down. I've resorted to an ice cube to help mine cool down.
It's definitely gone cold here now.
Yeah. Right. I'll be back. back already.
Did you notice the monsters I had behind me?
Yes, yeah. Oh, perfect.
they were running out the house, screaming their heads off, and every time I wanted to ask John a question, I had to go on mute because they were screaming so loudly.
Oh, yeah. Normally Isla or Evie would come in. My two kids would come in and stand beside me and suddenly appear.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, they've got those sort of cardboard things that you just stick over your face.
I saw that.
Monsters. Yeah.
Yeah. Perfect. I like it. That was really good. Talk from John. I like that. I saw a very similar version of that that he gave down at NDC, but it's interesting to see how far he's come on.
Yeah.
In the last 6 to 8 months, and lockdown's obviously given him time.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see if WPF starts picking up again with core support now.
Yeah, certainly as it's open source now, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, it's one hell of a learning curve. It took me a good 6 months to get up to speed with WPF when I first learned it. But once I was into it, and then you use MVVM, it suddenly becomes, oh, this is really easy compared to WinForms.
Yep. Yeah, until the thing I've not worked out yet, because I rolled my own as well, was switching views in and out. And I think if you're using something like MVVM, like that gets handled for you.
Yeah.
But I've got in my apps, I have a main view that's just a blank piece of XAML, and I put the view model into that and take it back out to switch the views.
Yeah.
But when you do that, all of the bindings break.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you end
the
up
thing
with
that always used to throw me was, I can't remember whether it was list view or tree views, where you get so far up the hierarchy, and then it would be a container, and you couldn't get out the container to see the thing inside. And so if I needed something outside, I had to use a really complex view model that both things were talking to.
Yeah, it's complicated. I found though using stuff like reflection worked really well to be able to grab hold of properties and stuff like that. If you had like loads of different controls on there, but they're all just named 1 to 8 or something, but I'd use stuff like reflection and just getting properties based on a text value rather than the actual hard-coded event.
Yeah, be interesting to see how that works in core, because obviously you lost a bit of reflection in core.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I don't know. We'll give it a couple more minutes before we kick off with Dave's talk. Don't forget, for the people that are here and listening and not at the toilet, don't forget, obviously next month we've got the Microsoft IoT, Azure IoT Special with Pamela Cortez and Benjamin Carbe. I think it's Carbe, you pronounce that. I'm sure he'll correct me. So that'll be really cool. We've got .NET Knots at the end of the month, which that's going to be fab as well. So do come and tune into that. And other than that, we'll kick off in a couple of minutes' time with Dave's talk about 25. I can't wait for that. It's going to be fab.
I might drop off midway because the boys desperately want to see it, so I might catch up on the YouTube with them tomorrow.
Yeah, I need to show Isla as well.
Yeah,
because Isla's watched the film.
Yeah,
she'll want to watch that.
Yeah, because I didn't want them to start watching it, streaming it to the TV now, and then say, "Oh, don't want to go to bed."
Yeah, exactly.
So I thought I might sort of drop out in about 5-10 minutes and then watch it on YouTube.
Yeah, no worries.
This is the only time my partner said she might come and listen to this.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
Doesn't get, but she might.
Oh dear. It's still warm. I'm doing a bit of work for a client at the moment, and they've got these little Bluetooth sensors that are reading temperature and humidity and that sort of stuff. And I hooked up an ESP32 over there to read them as a as a little project, and actually that's been running continuously for the last, I don't know, couple of months now, just reading the temperature and humidity of those. So I often check in on that to see what it thinks is going on. What's it saying? 30.76 degrees.
Oh my God.
And a humidity of 53.49%. Sounds lower than it feels, actually.
Yeah, I got desperate and bought an aircon unit at the weekend. I was really desperate. Saturday night with no sleep. I said, right, I'm off to home base.
How much are they these days, if you don't mind me asking?
The 9,000 BTU, I think, was about 250, but I went for the 12,000, which was 360.
Right.
But the only trouble is, it only comes with a 1.8 meter exhaust tube, and we've got fan lights, not sliding windows, and it doesn't quite. So I then had to go to Screwfix and get a 3 meter one, and then tie it all together with string, and then pop the 3 meter one out the fan light.
Oh, nightmare.
Yeah, but it works. But I dread to think the size of my electricity bill this month.
Yeah, there is that. Right.
I think it said on
It's
3 kilowatt hours.
Is alive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Right, and on that note, we'll hand over to Dave so he can tell us about. Look, I see he's alive. He is alive. I see him moving. Don't forget, you're on mute there, Dave. So.
I must have been talking to myself for the past 10 minutes.
Wondering why no one was answering you. Oh. Right, I am going to spotlight you as well. What I'm also going to do is, I noticed on YouTube that even though I'd spotlighted John, it didn't do that on YouTube. It kind of left it. So I'm going to try pinning you to the first screen and seeing if that actually helps with that. I don't know if that makes any odds on YouTube, but we'll see in a minute. But yeah, fire away.
Cool. Well, thanks to Pete for inviting me to actually talk. It's a bit. I'm apologising now because I've never done a talk before, so I'm just gonna ramble on. People ask questions, unmute yourself, and just ask whatever you're thinking. It makes my life easier. Yeah. So I'm making the assumption that everybody's seen Short Circuit. So. Yeah, it's been a very long project. 5 years ago, Short Circuit was on the TV, and I thought to myself, I'm going to build that. So that's exactly what I started to do. I looked for the resources, if there was anything out there, any information, and come across somebody that had been to Eric Allard. I don't know whether you guys are aware of him. He designed Johnny 5. He's a special effects guru in the States. So Terry, who leads our Input Inc. team, he got the opportunity to take Johnny 5 apart, the real one, strip him down to the very last nut and bolt, measured every possible measurement you can think of. Obviously, this is long before I was on the team. So I come across him, found that there were some CAD files floating around, started building from there, really. And then within a couple of years, I think I'd made such good progress that I ended up getting invited on to the actual team. So now there's a group of us, a couple of us from the UK, and the majority in the States or Canada, designing and building, making all the improvements to make a Johnny 5 for today, as opposed to 30 years ago. So yeah, it's certainly been a very interesting build. My background, I've got a background in electronics as a hobby, which is my dad's fault. And then I started building Knight Rider cars. So I was lucky enough to do a TV commercial with David Hasselhoff, which I sold the car off, funded this workshop, which then, yeah, started this off. The learning curve has been horrific. I've had to learn 3D printing, learning how to use a lathe, laser cutters, basically every hand tool you could possibly think of. And I am trying to encourage people to do it, not put people off. Yeah, so anybody got any questions about the beginning of the project, or anybody considering getting into the project?
I want you to tell me about your Knight Rider car now.
Yeah, well, Kit. I built Kit. I mean, who didn't love Knight Rider? You know, it's been one of those things. So I think I'm maybe a couple of years younger than you, Pete. Only just a couple. So yeah, I mean, grew up with it, and then I found out you could actually get a Trans Am, and then from there I built Kit, designed all the electronics, designed everything that went into it, met a great community of people, and then another friend, Steve, he kind of knows David Hasselhoff really well. So whenever he required a car in the UK, Steve always come to ask, different car owners throughout the UK. So I got to do a TV commercial for Manchester Opera House. He was doing some kind of off the hook. Yeah, the advert's still on YouTube if you look for it. So yeah, that was a great experience. And there's nothing quite like it. And you couldn't drive it anywhere without kind of getting, all the looks. You weren't allowed to drive it on the road with big red lights on, but it was one of those. So that was a fantastic experience, but I really got bored of working outside and days like today, just working on an engine, and so this was a welcome break from doing that. But now 5 years on, I do tend to look at this thing and just think, I wish I could chuck the cloth over him sometimes in the corner. But yeah, so as an overall build, this thing, it's aluminium with 3D printed covers, lots and lots of servos. I'm kind of guesstimating now, there's probably about 50 servos in there. We've part of the Input Inc. team. So the original Johnny 5 was using servos that are now 30 years old. They were probably about $400 each. And they were used absolutely everywhere throughout this robot. So what we've done is redesigned everywhere that there are those servos. So they actually look like the original servos, but there's actually a more powerful servo in there now for a lot less money. So yeah, he's certainly got the power where it counts. It's a very expensive project. All I would say is that, it's like John was saying earlier on, you can't just kind of go out and buy these parts off the shelf. The servos you can, but that's about it. I think there's over 6,000 unique parts. And, they've been machined, they've been laser cut here. If I had to say roughly the cost of my build, I'm considering this a prototype at the moment, I would say you're probably looking at £20,000. So,
really?
Yeah, £20,000 at the moment. So it would cost you a lot more if you were going to a company to get all the metal parts made, all the fabrication, because some of these parts are so small and so fiddly that they probably wouldn't do it, or they would say, it's not worth our time. So I think if you can get yourself a home setup, then yeah, there's absolutely no reason you can't do all this kind of stuff. Yeah, we're still working on, I don't know whether you guys remember in the first movie, his eyes pop out of his head. So we're just kind of working on that at the moment. A design has been finalized, just kind of getting ready to build some prototypes. So that's going into this, which is this is basically a 3D printed Johnny Five head. So it's a lot of printing. It's very high resolution, and especially now with the resin printers, you know, my friend's been 3D printing one of his, and you can even get the serial numbers on the components. It's that, you know, high detailed. But yeah. So there's some original parts there. The Wallensack 209. These were copier lenses from, God, obviously like 30 years ago. Quite hard to get hold of now. In fact, you probably only ever find them on eBay once a blue moon. And then you have to machine them down to the brass. So those are a great find. Lucky enough to get the original Fabco air neck pistons in the original anodized orange. So there's a lot of, you know, we kind of aspire to get the original stock parts if possible. I've just gotten the tires for the rear, so they're ready to go on, but I am building a second Johnny Five now, so I should be able to, hopefully, money permitting, you know, in the next 6 months or so. You know, it depends on whether I rush it or not, but I want it to be like a really high quality build. So yeah, I mean, I can fire them off, do a little animation, and then kind of explain how it works in very limited kind of ways. So if you'll do anything.
I do like the added lightning strikes that are happening outside your house.
Yeah, that's terrible. Yeah.
Disassemble. I have a sensor.
But yeah, lots of different things.
More input. Malfunction. Hey, laser lips. Your mama was a snowblower.
So yeah, this probably isn't the finalized design for electronic setup, but we're kind of all learning as we go at the moment. Obviously, there's so many servos on there that you can't control them all individually. You just couldn't take this to Comic-Con and stand there with the remote control and just move a finger back into or an arm up and down. There's just too much. I mean, there's about 26. There will be 26 plus servos in the head by the time we're finished. Because you've got the eyes up, down, left, right, iris articulation, the vents, the antennas, the iPod, just everything. There's just so much just in that one space, you could never do it. So what I've come up with the help of a friend of mine, Chris Jobson, who works with me, where he works on our systems team. He's been very kindly kind of coming round and helping set all this up. So we're using servo controls called Pololu Maestros. They're probably so big and are probably about £40 each. And what that allows you to do is plug in, depending on the size of the unit you're using, up to 24 servos. So there's one of those in the head. There's a 6-channel in the arm. There's a 6-channel in this arm. And then an 18-channel in the body. So what that does is you install a little bit of software on your computer, plug it in via USB, and then within there, you can go in and name every servo. So you'll have one for eyes up, down. I'll switch him off for now before he goes a bit, you'll carry on a bit. So yes, you basically move sliders. So you give every servo a name, up to 24 of them, just for the head now. You move the sliders round, and then you click Save Frame 1, and then you move them all again. So basically, you're creating scenes.
Stop motion animation almost, isn't it?
That's exactly what it is. Except this is really, really clever. And then once you've created a scene, you can play it back, and you can slow down the servos in certain areas, or speed it up. So I have at the moment frame 1, for instance. I call it happy, which is, you know, about 2 minutes of just head movements, facial expressions, that kind of thing. Then the one in the body, I create another scene, dragging the arms round, dragging the neck pistons because they're driven separately, the neck rotation, shoulders, the hug motion. So the body controller does that. It does the console. I call that happy, frame 1. Just move it around for a given period of time so it all kind of matches up. Exactly the same for the arms, rinse, repeat. You move them around, you know. It's hard. I mean, you can copy the scenes from the movie, but there's so much in it, and I'm not one for sitting there kind of going, oh, he did this, he did this, he did this. So I just think when you randomly make these movements happen and just record them, I think it's like 2 minutes for the head. So I make the one for the body 2 minutes. I make the ones for the arms 2 minutes. When you press that and the button and then they all kind of go off together, it just comes to life. And then you add a little bit of audio in there, which is what I'm currently trying to work out. So in the head, we have the Palolo Maestro. We have an amplifier, an MP3 player, speakers, an Arduino Nano. What else have we got in there? And an Easy B, which is another servo controller, but it's a little bit more. I'm using all these different things to do different things. You could probably bring it all together, but at the moment, you know, I haven't found a way of easily doing that. So as I've said, the Palolo Maestro in the head does all the servo controls. Then just behind the eyes, there's neopixels to give, you know, the red eyes from the first movie when he's angry. Now, they can only be switched not via Maestro, so that they have to be switched via the Arduino Nano. So the Maestro, you set one of the pins as an output pin, which then puts a voltage out to the Arduino, which then says to turn the LEDs on, so it's almost a very overcomplicated way of turning on some LEDs. But we've done it this way and used NeoPixels because there are others out there that might want, you know, the colors to change or to sequence different things. Then the Easy B is another servo controller, and it's a very good servo controller, but it relies on having laptop connectivity, whereas the Maestro doesn't. The Maestro needs it to be set up with to begin with, and then you write the script to it, and it stores that on the unit itself. So the Easy B, I'm literally using that at the moment just for audio. So that's triggering. It's a Wi-Fi unit. So the laptop connects on a bit of an ad hoc network, and then I'm triggering the sounds manually at the moment, but it also does voice recognition and facial recognition, which is, it's good and it works, but it works inconsistently. So I'm not thrilled about having to go to a Comic-Con to drive him around with a controller, then use another controller to fire off the sequences and scenes, and dragging around what you need to have is a fairly powerful laptop or a fairly powerful tablet to do all that processing of the visual data. It does work, you know, but if you go to a Comic-Con, it's not just Dave standing there. It's a huge amount of noise. It's hundreds of people's faces. So I don't know how that would deal with that. Going forward, I'll probably look into the Raspberry Pi and try and use that to consolidate a lot of the technologies that are in there at the moment. So yeah, I have to apologize. The thunder and lightning that's happening at the moment, it's quite scary. So
it's all good.
Any questions on any this for now?
I wonder if how much of that you could do with at least one, if not more, Raspberry Pis dotted around.
Yeah, the Raspberry Pi, it does do the facial recognition and probably does the audio. I do have a Pi 4, which hasn't been fitted yet. So, I don't know if you remember in the first movie, they opened up his lower chest section here.
Mm-hmm.
Which mine's currently empty because I've got it here. So I've got a basically a HDMI screen. So this is the console.
Nice.
So that's exactly as it was in the movie. So my coding is super basic. I'm learning, but obviously I keep finding myself in that position where I've got so many things on that I don't really have the time to learn. So I kind of scour the internet, and as soon as I can make something do what I need it to do, I use it that way.
Yep.
So, and especially with lockdown, being causing all the issues that it has, and my friends will be able to come round, so I've been kind of having to wing it a little bit. So that I'd like to, we want, as part of the inputting team, we want to write a piece of software or maybe an operating system. So just like the original movie, and you can kind of go through all the menus on the touch screen, check battery voltages, check temperatures of servos, if anything you can get feedback on, which would be quite cool.
Sean's just put in the chat that you should open source your code, and then loads of people would help you.
Yeah, well, I mean, at the moment,
volunteering. Come on, I'll do some Johnny 5 code.
There you go.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, well, just give me a shout on Twitter. But honestly, it's so, the coding is so basic. So the way that it's kind of getting triggered off at the moment is just under the chest cover here. There's an Arduino Nano connected to an XB wireless link controller, which then has a single pin, which basically triggers. It's connected to the RX of all the Clolly Maestros. So I'm saying trigger scene 1, and it's triggering scene 1 on every controller. And trigger scene 2 is the same thing. So the end that I'm triggering from is this. It's just an Arduino Uno with a touchscreen and the XB hat. So it works at the moment. It's super basic, but it does the job to kind of get the point across. So I'm just in the middle of, so this is the circuit board that I've designed that goes inside Johnny 5's head. This is version 1. As you do, you design it, you pop it, there's so many servos in there, it's basically spaghetti junction. It's a mess. So I designed this board with the, I'll show you on here. So now this board fits in there perfectly. So all the servo wires can route through and they plug in their designated areas. And then you drop a controller in. So you're kind of getting rid of all the wires, go into one place. So I'm just doing version 2 of this now. It'll have, denser trails for power because I did a couple of tests and we were looking at maybe 8.5 amps with just the head servos moving. So
wow.
That's, that is a lot of that's a lot of power. So I kind of underspec, very naively underspec the traces on the circuit board. So the plan is now going forward, and I'm sure the other guys won't mind me saying, we're looking, instead of having, I'm making the assumption you guys know about XBs because it's, I'm not sure it's what you guys do.
Tell us anyway. Tell us anyway.
Yeah, so at the moment it's an XB, it's 1-to-1, and then the signals are getting fired off to all the boards. But what we are planning on doing is having an XB in the master controller and then setting up an XB mesh network. So each arm will have an XB. The head will have one, dedicated to the board. So I'm hoping that will alleviate any kind of issues. Should be fairly secure because these XP Series 2, nightmare to configure, but they're very configurable. Yeah, and we can maybe leverage, certainly going forwards. I want to look into the Telemetry Suit. So if you guys have seen anything from Short Circuit 1, you'll know that they had a chap basically off side of the robot, and when he moved his arms, the robot moved its arms. So it's all basically sensors up and down everywhere. And because the original J5 was just a puppet, so they drove it around. One person controlled all the stuff to do with the arms, the head, the whole works. And a lot of the original robot was, cable driven. Somebody was kind of off screen holding an arm and individually triggering the fingers. So very much, movie magic. So what we've done here is kind of gone one ahead, and the whole thing is automated. So, which we're quite proud of. And you've probably seen recently, I did an interview with a friend of mine, and he got Eric Allard, who designed Johnny 5, to join the interview, which is really cool. So it's always nice getting feedback from from the guy that designed the original robot. It's really, really cool. So yeah, the track drive system, we've kind of not stripped it back. It's a very geared down system now. If you look on the website input-inc.com, input-inc.com, we've got a link to YouTube videos there, and Terry from the States, who's leading our team, he actually pulled a car with just the base of Johnny 5. There's so much power and torque in these things, it's just unreal. So
what was that website again?
So input.
Yep.
-inc.
Oh, -inc.
Yeah, .com. And then on there you'll see, we've been looking up all of the trip pictures on there, so you'll get links to the original robot being stripped apart, all the documentation we've got, all the videos that were taken, all of our videos, all of our individual team member build pages. There's just there's literally so much on there. It's just crazy. But it's quite nice being one of the first to actually have, one of these rolling around. But like I've said, I consider it more a prototype because there's so much that's changed, so much that's been fiddled with and changed and dropped and broken. So yeah, so the next version, I was saying to Pete early on, the next version will be pristine. This one I might just paint it gold and just, at least that way we kind of got two. I'm very fortunate to have a very understanding wife who who puts up with all this crazy stuff. Yeah, bonkers.
It's fantastic. I really like it.
Yeah, like I say, I have the moments of love-hate relationship. I can push him to one side for a couple of months, and then I'll come back to it a little bit more reinvigorated. As far as I'm concerned, at the moment with this one, everything works other than the iPop, which is what we're working on. And it's more just the redesigns of everything that we're doing. So, yeah, I mean, it literally is what it is. I'm looking forward to getting him out to Comic Cons. Probably won't drive him around Comic Cons. I've seen a few people. There are a few of the people in the UK that have made 3D printed ones. So obviously what you're getting there is a lot less weight, but a lot less structural stability. So, this thing weighs, I would say, about 30 stone.
Oh.
So, you know, the radio control system, just this one controller, is dedicated to the track drive, because I just wanted it to be, you know, 100% dedicated. There's nothing there that can go wrong. I've never seen a radio control system, touch wood, go wrong. So, but at the same time, these events are always busy. If this hits somebody, he's not going to get hurt. But at the same time, he's got enough power and enough torque to actually not stop. You know, so you put your foot there and he would go over you as opposed to the other way around. So, yeah, I try not to fill people with horror stories. So yeah, so if you ever see me at events, he would be very much behind the barrier, or he would be switched off for photos, you know, different things like that. So yeah, it's been an entertaining project. 5 years in the works. Kind of posted little bits here and there to Twitter, and I think what surprised me with it was, you know, not many people thought Short Circuit was kind of this, you know, it's not like a hit movie. It's more, you know, it's more remembered by the fans. But I started posting little videos of, to me, you know, just this head moving backwards and forwards, and all of a sudden people started liking it, and then I started putting a few more videos up with, you know, just a little bit more content in there. And yeah, next thing I knew, it was 200,000 views, and I'm like, wow, kind of gone from 200 followers to 1,500 overnight, and so it has kind of taken off a lot. So I'm excited to see people's reactions to it in real life. So, you know, he doesn't look much over a webcam, but in real life, you know, once he's kind of, this thing goes like 6.5, 7 foot tall when he's on his tiptoes. You know, it's huge, but you can also shrink him down so it isn't too intimidating. But yeah, I kind of get sick of the sight of it. My kids they're just used to it. And then I've got other projects on now. As you can see, I'm building a 10-foot transformer.
Somebody was asking about that earlier, if it was Soundwave next to BB-8.
Yeah, Soundwave, BB-8, Dio from the latest movie. So I'm a member of a really awesome group called Mr. Batley's Printed Droids. And he basically designs all these Star Wars droids in the fastest time possible and super, super accurate. And yeah, he puts the designs out there. Just the build quality and the design quality is just phenomenal. So for anybody that's into 3D printing or electronics and building, and if you join the group, everybody there is so helpful. So if you don't know about electronics or Arduinos and coding, it's just there for you to just do it. So the amount of time it takes to 3D print like Dio, you know, I think it took me about 2 weeks to 3D print the entire thing. Tiny little bit of electronics, and then the coding, and then yeah, it fully works, fully self-balancing. So yeah.
And what was that? What was that group called?
On Facebook, it's called Mr. Badley's Printed Droids. I can certainly send a link over, but it is one of the best Star Wars related groups. I mean, I've made a lot of great friends through it. So, but yeah, sorry, back onto Johnny 5. I deviated there a little bit. If anybody's interested in building Johnny 5, we have released the CAD files to build it.
Okay.
So, like I said, you know, if you've got the skills to do the metal work, then your pockets need to be a little less deep, or if you know somebody that can do all the metal work. At the end of the day, it's just laser cut panels of metal, and then you just screw it together and just make sure it's really solid. But we do have the official Facebook group. I think it's called Inputting Builders Community. And then there's another, if you guys remember Short Circuit 2, they were building and selling the little small Johnny Five toys.
Yeah.
So we've also, one of the guys on our team, Andrew, he's actually CAD'd up the toy. So you can actually 3D print the toy. It's all there and it's all free.
That's cracking.
Yeah. Like I say, it's one of those projects you certainly kind of go, if you're mechanically inclined, fantastic. I kind of jumped in the deep end. I had no background in 3D printing, no background in mechanics or laser cutting, 3D printing, CNCs, lathes, anything like that. So it was certainly a steep learning curve, but as soon as you see a little bit of progress, majority of the people start with a head because it's the first thing people recognize, and you can kind of make it completely independent. So you can build the head and stick it on a plinth. You don't need to build the rest of this just to have that, and you can put all the animatronics into it, and the technology is out there just to make it do stuff. So yeah, it's certainly it's a fantastic project, but yeah, it takes a lot of time. I mean, it's taken me 5 years because the CAD that I was using was incomplete. So a lot of it was design work, using SolidWorks. But then when I kind of got onto the team, I had access to all the latest CAD that we've been working on. So it's been a team effort redesigning the arms, all the new servo systems, and whereas things were relying on audio input line level stuff, now you can do all the lift lights using Arduino. It's the technology certainly made it more accessible. So yeah, definitely check it all out if you're interested.
Mm.
Yeah.
What have you got doing the voice synthesis part? How have you done that?
So we have a very limited library of the original movie audio. So that's basically packed on an SD card in his head. And then the EZ robots, or EZB, which is a small, tiny controller, my laptop links to that. And then there's if anybody hasn't seen EZ robots, do look into it if you're beginning. It's super, super highly configurable. But you have basically an app that you install on your laptop, and within there's projects. So you can add a PWM project, you can add a NeoPixel project, and all these things, these little panels build up in the screen, and the board will literally do all of it. So it does, there's AI modules in there. I've not delved that far into it because I really don't want to kind of go down the laptop route, for reasons I said earlier on. But it runs the speech recognition. It's got, all the camera access, a super, super configurable board. It's great, but it's not the way I want to go with this. So, but it's one of those things, again, it's each to their own, where I'm sure that they're probably, since we've released the CADs, there's probably lots of people building, but I know of a couple in the UK. So yeah, so I'm just kind of I've bought my first resin printer for my birthday last week, trying to get my head around understanding how it all works, and the quality difference in resin printing is just phenomenal. So all these detailed panels, which Well, you can see that. That's all done FDM, which, as anybody else in the world will tell you, it comes off. You can do high resolution. It takes days and days and days. Then you're spending days sanding, painting, priming, sanding more so. And it's just such a long process. Whereas resin, the part comes off exactly as it is in the CAD. It's just absolutely immaculate. So all you're doing there is quick light sand, just so your paint or primer will key to it, and you're good to go. So yeah, and just the part quality. It's just, you know, little things like this. It's hard to see in this camera. But yeah, you know, that would have taken a couple of hours on the other printers. But on the resin, just in, out, up and down, brilliant. Fantastic thing. So yeah.
I'm assuming more expensive than a regular 3D printer.
No, actually, they've become super accessible. I mean, the printers that I'm using, which you can hear whirring away behind me, they've got build volume. So it's 400 by 400 by 400, which, you know, so that's a good size. And I primarily got those for building things like Soundwave, where the parts are massive. And I've just picked up another 500 by 500 by 500 printer. And then I've got 2 on the floor there, which I've built myself, which are having a bit of a service. And then this resin printer. The resin printer was £190, which is great, but the build volume is, you know, probably maybe a little bit smaller than a standard envelope, which is fine for doing small detail parts. But this is my first. I thought I might as well get this as a taster into resin printing, and it certainly is an art. The way you orient the parts on the bed, and it's just a different kind of way of looking at 3D printing. This is fairly small, but for £190, you know, I'm getting the quality and I can do the parts. I will be looking to get another brand soon called the Stapley Phenom. Now that is basically a resin printer, but on a humongous scale. And the price difference there is it's £2,500. So, you know, there's a bit of saving going on at the moment. But there again, I'll be able to do huge resin parts. You know, so Johnny Five's entire head, I could probably do that whole piece in one go. It would take a long time, but you know, you're not sanding, you're getting immense accuracy from it. So yeah, 3D printing is certainly the future. Yeah. So, anybody have any exciting questions? Or
So Sean said he reckons that this talk should come with a disclaimer that your enthusiasm and encouragement could result in the path to significant wallet depletion.
Yeah, I try to be encouraging and sound great. That's my best accent for you. Yeah, it is a super expensive hobby. You know, just the servos for just the motors. You're talking, I'm going to say ballpark £3,000. So there's a couple of things I'm still trying to swap out on mine where the original linear actuator, which you can't see at the back here, but it has to be really, really chunky because he weighs so much. It's the majority of his weight, I would say, is up top. But because there's an actuator that sits behind the midsection here that pushes him up and down, that's essentially moving all of that load. The original actuator that they used in the movie, it's out there, but typically it's out there in America. So while the actuator, I wouldn't mind spending £250 on it, the shipping, the customs, you're turning, you know, you're probably looking £500. And you're paying them, that's £500 for a 30+ year actuator. So what I've done is I've bought a bog standard high torque linear actuator. I think I probably paid about 40, 50 pounds for it. And then I designed and 3D printed a cover to go around it that makes it look identical to the original. So yeah, and it does the job, but I need to swap them out because they're linear actuators, which means they've got end stops. So once they've gone to the end of the throw that they can finally move the rod in and out, they stop. So that doesn't give you very much in positionability. So if you look at a linear servo, which is basically a linear actuator with feedback, the price then goes from 40 to 50 pounds to 300 pounds straight away. So, you know, there's gains, but then I'd rather get the original actuator if I'm spending that kind of money.
True.
But like I say, it's shipping everything from America. It's a lot of this has been awkward because the barbs for the neck cylinders themselves, it's all American. So you can probably kind of see where I'm coming from with the original cost of £20,000. So I'm really hoping that, yes, I'm going to build another one. So there will be cost there. But I've come across a couple of companies which were recommended to me, and the sheet metal parts that they've been producing for me, I can't even compete with it. There's no point in me buying the sheet metal parts. By the time I've bought a sheet of metal that will do one section of this lower torso, you're probably talking 20, 30 pounds, and I'd probably get, yes, both sections out of it. But there's a company that I've been using that will actually cut me that section for £6. So, and I don't know whether it's because of the project or just because they're just that good. Yeah, so I've been kind of going to them for steel parts, but you know, everything's unique. So by the time you've got the CAD and turned it into the DXF flat drawing, made sure it's sized and scaled exactly. You know, you're sending them quite a lot of stuff. To be fair, I cannot fault it. So, yeah, just, you know, if you're going to do a project like this, do it slowly, do it properly, and you won't go far wrong. And there are a lot of us out there who can answer a lot of questions because the other guys on the team, I'm kind of one of these guys that throw it together, I build it, does it work? Yes, no. But they'll actually look into the math behind it all, you know, how far the throw is for the IPOP mechanism, you know, how much torque and thrust is required, which is great because it means I don't have to do it because I'm not that way inclined. Do his eyes shoot out of his head 1,000,000 miles an hour? Yes, fantastic. So, yeah, it's kind of watch this space, and you know, we're releasing the CAD as we once it's tested, then yeah, we're putting it out there for people. But if you go to the input-inc.com website, there are links there to all the original file downloads, more documentation that you can shake a stick at, original short circuit scripts, but more interestingly, if you're, you know, the original Johnny 5 instruction book. So, you know, that was handed over by the guys that designed and built him, saying, you know, every point of articulation, every, you know, every radio connection, what it does, what you need to maintain. It's so cool. You know, there were points where I was driving this round and it was so kind of wobbly and rickety. And that was my concern. I was like, well, this doesn't seem great. But then to read the instruction book, they were saying, he is wobbly, he is rickety, and it had to be designed that way. So if he was too rigid, when you're driving this round and the track drive system that it is, you'd hit a bump and the shock that would go through the system would just kind of end up breaking something. So it's been designed to have that little bit of give and flexibility in there. Well, it doesn't come across on the film. And obviously with the interview with Eric Allard, what he actually did say was they shot at 24 frames a second. So a lot of the wobbles and the things that you wouldn't want to see, you don't see. It just seems to work really well for that kind of speed the film was shot in. So yeah, real life. It'd be interesting to see what people think. So I'm hoping when the world kind of resumes some kind of normality, I can get them out there and see people's reaction to it. Yeah.
So a bit like Kit, have you been asked to use him for adverts or any promo material or anything like that?
No promo material at the moment. I've had loads and loads and loads of people messaging me about charity events.
Right.
I'm all for charity. I'm all for charity events, but I've still got to transport a 30-stone robot a great distance. You know, so yeah, I've got a problem with charity events. I can't subsidize all the traveling. You know, I've had lots of people asking me to build them one, which I'm not allowed to do. It's very much like the R2-D2 thing and the Disney Lucasfilm. You know, they're allowed to build these things, but they're not allowed to sell them at profit or sell them or profit from them. So, but they're allowed to do charity stuff. I don't know whether the Johnny 5 thing goes that far. I'd like to think I can hire it out. You know, certainly be nice to make some money back on it as opposed to costing me a fortune. But yeah, certainly, like I said, I've got no issues with helping people out. You know, talking them through builds or issues they're having. Yeah, it'd be nice to get some work out of it. A few of my friends do the London Film and Comic Con, and they've said it would be really cool to have Johnny 5 on stage introducing guests.
Yeah.
So, and I'm all for that. That sounds fantastic. Obviously, it'll be the nerves, the paranoia. You know, even though he's star of the show, as it were, I'd be off stage wetting my pants. Will he stop going forwards when I tell him to? You know, yeah. Because a lot of these venues, you know, I suppose a lot of the IoT stuff, a lot of everything now is just wireless connected, Bluetooth connected. So you have to take into consideration, you know, you go to one of these events, and I bet you all the lights, all the, you know, all the backlighting, all that sort of stuff is all Wi-Fi or something that's throwing out, you know, some kind of signal. Or so you have to consider how it will affect everything that's running inside. Wow, I don't know if you can see the lights that was happening.
Yep.
Great. If I go off, it's blown my Wi-Fi up. Yeah, so there's a lot more to take into account and consideration than just turning up to an event now. That is frightening. Yeah, there's a lot to take into consideration, not just the aspects of, you know, how much battery does he use, which is a lot.
Is it a car battery you've got in there, or?
At the moment, he's running on 4 UPS batteries.
Right.
But he needs. Have you heard of a technology called LiFePO?
LiPo?
Not LiPo. So LIFE.
No.
Yeah, so it's called. Yeah, so it's the word life. LiFePO 4. Now, they tend to be used in solar panels. So you know, the solar panels charge these batteries, and LiFePO 4 batteries are what they would install in your home.
Right.
They're brilliant. They can have. Put this in perspective of, I've got 4 UPS batteries in here, all at 12 volts each, and about 16 amps an hour. One LiFePO 4 cell can be 100 amps an hour. So obviously with this, we've had to take into consideration cell size. Johnny 5, he runs on 24 volts, but we stepped down the voltages to all the different servos, 5 volts, 3 volts, 12 volts. So the system we've come up with is 3.2 volts per cell at 100 amps an hour, and then put all those in. So by the time you get to the end, the voltage is 24 volts, but you're still maintaining at 100 amps an hour. So it'd be a lot more than that actually. So you're still getting the same voltage, but a humongous capacity for running. And like I said, you know, he can pull a car, so he certainly needs the juice. Yeah. So I think that's him all in all, unless anyone's got any specific questions regarding any of the technology or areas in which you need plenty of patience.
Can you make him go up? You mentioned he gets quite tall. Have you got space in there to make him go up? Or
I can't at the moment because I was upgrading the wiring, and it's one thing I've actually disconnected. Yeah, so he's got 2 holes where the button should be.
All right.
So, as much as I would love to, I can't for this demonstration. In fact, I think the last couple of videos I've done, he's been in this position. So at the midpoint, so you kind of got this action. So he kind of goes up like that.
Wow.
So yeah, at the moment, you can see how tall I am compared to him. Well, he would actually go bigger than me.
Wow.
He's fully upright. So we were looking at things, camera placement. That's a difficult one because I can't think of anywhere you could put a camera in his head that wouldn't look obvious. Because I've had him doing the visual tracking, which is another fantastic feature of the EZB. And you can connect that to the internet. So, for instance, you guys will be able to view it over the internet, you know, and go to a dedicated web server. And you could type in things. One of our members, Kyle, he kind of did a live thing on YouTube where the camera was just on his Johnny 5, and I think he'd gotten the original voice, you know, like the old DTMF robotic voices that they had in the first movie. He put one of them on it and did it through the computer. So people were going onto this web page and typing in the phrase they wanted the robot to say. And then they'd watch the robot speak like that from the first movie, but saying what they wanted. It's really cool.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good.
Has anybody else got any other questions? I've asked all the questions. Silence now.
I do apologize if I missed anything. Like I said before, I've never given a talk before, so you know, it's knowing what to cover, because I think robotics can be one of those things where, you know, I could certainly talk about you know, the neck drive system, but it might bore people to death. So you know, it's always easier to say, you know, is there any specific piece people are interested in or what they want to know about, and then I can explain it. Or
did he say you've got a parts list for him somewhere?
A parts list? We've got the original CAD is the parts list.
Right.
So what you would do is download the entire CAD for the robot. You probably need SolidWorks or eDrawings viewer to be able to view the SolidWorks stuff. You need a super good PC, because if you open up the main assembly, there's, I think it said, you know, 6,000 to 7,000 unique parts. So by the time all those assemblies have been brought in, yeah, you're talking, you know, my laptop's got 8 gig of RAM, and it's like death trying to open up anything. I can screen share. I've got a couple of images which I showed earlier on, so I can screen share and just show you what the CAD looks like, not the whole robot, mind, because I'm not super prepared. This is a learning curve for me doing this kind of thing, so I will be super prepared next time.
No, you've done a cracking job. It's been awesome.
So, can anyone see that?
Yep.
So that's obviously the neck drive system. Each and every screw, nut, bolt, socket it's all been drawn by Andrew Friedberg, our CAD guy, and it's just every servo has been recreated in there. It's just literally down to the very last detail. It's scary. So what you're seeing now on the screen, this is the neck drive system. So you've got 2 servos in the center, here, back to back. These are 380 kilogram servos, and they then drive these arms on the piston. And the pistons there connect on the original robot, which obviously you cannot see in the background, but they go off to his neck. So it's a push-pull system. So we've tried every type of fluid under the sun for this. The diameter of the pipe is it's probably 1.5 mil. So if you imagine in the movie, they seem to have these neck pistons that just moved super fast, super swift, which is great. But as soon as you put any oils in there or synthetic oils, it slows everything up. You know, there's a bottleneck. The inside diameter of the pipe, so the pistons, I've even bored that out on mine to make it just, you know, to try and get every little bit of extra flow you can get. But every time, these servos, like I said, they're 380 kilograms, so they can push that fluid back into no problem at all. But the pressure that's there is crazy. And I was getting no end of leaks. And then I think one of the lads looked at, you know, synthetic oil, like baby oil, but then it leaks past the seals, or you were looking at other stuff that degraded the seals really quickly. So we ended up, we've been using PC coolant. So, you know, the fluid that you stick in your PC into.
Really?
Yeah. And that stuff is what I'm using in there. And I did a couple of videos, and the movement is just brilliant. Absolutely unreal. So yes, we're using £15 PC coolant.
Easily available as well.
Easily available. What's nice is it's non-toxic. Because obviously if I go to an event and the servo, we get a leak somewhere, and you buy a celebrity and it squirts toxic, it's going to go down a treat. Whereas, you know, this is pretty good. I've opted for the color tinted stuff, so if I do have a leak, I can see it.
Mm-hmm.
So, and this is slightly old CAD now, because we were going with a pressurized system, but based on my testing, I've just filled it manually. There's no pressurized system there at all, and it works a treat. Certainly very effective. So the next bit of CAD is the head. In fact, it's not. It's the same thing on the side. The next one, so that's the head. So each and every part of this is a unique part, all being brought together in an assembly, the whole thing. You can see the iris spines. They've all been drawn individually into an assembly. You can actually go into the CAD and rotate it. The level of detail, and you can see why this has been going on for years and years and years.
Mm-hmm.
So at some point, I really, really would like to, like I said before, I think it'd be cool coming up with some kind of operating system I mean, I'm probably dreaming quite big now, but some kind of operating system. And for the telemetry kind of based stuff, I'd love to have a little screen with a mini Johnny 5 on there, and you use a little stylus pen to drag his arm, and his arm moves in real life. I want automation. I mean, this is me and my demands.
I think you've earned a few demands.
Having the automation is great because it means I can press one button, drive Johnny 5 round, and he's going to move around and interact with people in a limited degree, and it looks cool. And that's what I've done for all my other videos. But what I do want is to be able to, if somebody says, let's do this kind of little skit where, you know, he comes over, he grabs something, he talks, he looks at somebody. So building the telemetry suit or some kind of puppeteering system, as well as what he's got there, to be able to switch between them, I think that's living the dream.
Yeah, a little bit like you said at the start of the movie where the guy's moving his arms. If you could do that and record it. Yeah.
Or real time.
Yeah, even better.
Because I will look to do some kind of telemetry suit. The original one that they used on the robot was kind of, if you Google any pictures of it, it's like a huge frame. Their arms are going through huge pipes, and you know they've had to turn things to kind of get all the movements required. That you know I can't rotate my wrist right around like he can. So I'm trying to design something that will fit under your clothes. But with regards to fingers and wrists, I'd like to think that there's some kind of sensor-based system. You know, technology's moved on in the last 30 plus years, so there's got to be some cool way of doing it.
Have you seen Imogen Heap's gloves that she uses for playing music?
No, I haven't.
This is really cool. She's got an ESP32 in some gloves, and she's got sensors on the fingers and mercury sensors for rotation and stuff like that. And she's feeding that into it and back onto her computer to play MIDI. So like what John's doing. But it sounds like you could be taking that same idea to do this.
Yeah, well, certainly for the fingers, because my friend Chris came up with a suggestion quite a while back that yes, we can use a potentiometer in the arm, you know, in the kind of elbow area, which is great because the movement is super easy. But for the rotation, could we not just kind of have something that kind of straps to your wrist and use a gyro?
Now let me share this, and it's only a couple of minutes long, this video. Let's see if I can get the audio as well.
Hello.
Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Please come in.
This is Imogen Heap.
I'm Imogen Heap, and I'm a musician. More recently, I've been developing these beautiful gloves that help me gesturally interact with my computer so that I can make music on the move in the flow and more humanly, more naturally engage with my computer software and technology. So here they are. This is the latest one. This is an earlier one, and these are many other iterations.
That's really cool.
What this glove enables me to do is access mappings inside my computer so that I don't have to go to a keyboard or a fader or a button. I can use, say, a fader instead of doing this, which is not very expressive or exciting for me or the audience. I can do this. So I'm moving around the scale by going up and down. Down there goes down a fifth, or down a fourth. And then I can change the filter like that. And I can go between different sounds by going up and down using the pitch. This is what we call pitch. This is what we call yaw.
There you go, kind of get the idea
Yeah.
of what she's done. But that, yeah, I'll put the link in the chat to the video. It's quite cool, actually. She goes into, oops, she's still talking. Shush.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's exactly kind of what we need. Because the finger movements, I think, you know, it'd be quite cool, you know, the original suit, you would have never kind of stood to one side and got away with, you know, being inconspicuous. But, you know, with that level of movement, if you could move and manipulate his fingers, because there's only 3 servos pulling the finger wires. So if you could get him to hold a pen and then you're making the movements for him, you could be charging £5 an autograph from Johnny Five.
That'd be cool. But I mean, you could do that with an ESP32, which is, you know, pretty much one of those. Not too dissimilar to your Nano that you've got there, but these things have got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in.
Yeah.
And they're like £7 for an ESP32. They're dead cheap.
I'll have to look into it then.
Yeah.
Look into that.
But you can have another one of these sitting in Johnny Five there somewhere, coordinating what's actually happening through the Bluetooth or the Wi-Fi link, however you wanted to do it, from a couple of gloves or something like that. I reckon, it's all work, and you're quite right. It's time to do all of that stuff, but it's doable, I think.
But I look at it from a perspective of, you know, you kind of always say these things are never really finished.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm designing the version 2 circuit board now, but I'd like to have that, you know, the XB unit is tiny, but as well as being able to just trigger a single pin to kind of get these scenes to play, the XB's also got loads of IO pins on there, which you can, you know, get to do things. So we thought if we have one in this arm, one in that arm, one in the body, one in the head, then we've got access to these individual servos, so we can use those lines for real feedback. You know, it's basically doing what this does, but with sensors on your hands. Yeah. So yeah,
that'd be wicked.
Oh, it's gonna be really cool. It's just, it's another thing on the whiteboard. You know, another thing on the list.
And you've got a day job, yeah?
Yes, I do. I'm a network security analyst
there you
for
go.
my local council.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, lots of routing, switching, firewalls, that kind of thing.
Awesome.
So, yeah. Obviously, I'd much prefer to do this as a day job. But
I don't know. As soon as you start doing something as a day job, it takes a different meaning, doesn't it? And takes some of the fun away from it. And
I don't know. I think I'm kind of at that point now, though. I do feel like, you know, I would like that challenge. You know, even if I was kind of doing stuff, I don't know, just building props. You know, when I kind of got into IT, 2000, you know, it was a different time then. You know, and I'm not kind of dissing local government, but it's not well paid. You know, it's certainly not. You know, yeah, it's one of them things. I could go on about it, but you know, this is kind of my passion now. I love building stuff.
What about Patreon? Have you thought about kicking one of those off? Maybe.
Yeah, I've thought about it, but what I'm trying to do is, because I'm not super strong with CAD and doing all the drawings, so Soundwave is my first attempt at doing CAD. So I've designed it from scratch. So I'm looking forward to seeing the finished product, and I've designed the cassettes that go in his chest. You know, this will be animatronic. I don't know whether they'll get him walking, but certainly his arms, his head, his neck, you know, the guns, the chest will open. And that's just another thing to take to Comic-Cons. But I'm hoping with the learning curve of that I'm going to try and design something really cool, maybe something smaller than Johnny Five and Soundwave. But I want to design something that maybe I can put out there and maybe people want to buy it, you know, if it's any good. Or certainly come up with a way of, you know, making some money for once.
Something a little less copyrighted as well.
Yes, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, moving into the Star Wars universe, yeah, you don't have a chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm assuming you'd probably end up. Who owns the rights to this? Is it Sony or something? Was it
Sony? Yeah.
Yeah.
But I up to now, I haven't seen, well, because I don't think there is any of these Johnny Fives out there. I know that somebody originally designed a mini Johnny 5 from the second movie, and they had to change it, and they couldn't call it Johnny 5 on the branding. They had to call it Robot V.
All right.
So just because of you know, the cease and desist that you get. I'm not interested in you know, making loads of money from Johnny 5. If I'm allowed to make money from hiring him out, great.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's going to be worth a while in some sense. Other than that, I'd love to kind of just do something that, you know, other people kind of get into. My inspirations are, you know, Johnny 5, Transformers, Star Wars. So if I can come up with something that's mine that people like, fantastic.
Cool.
But it's just coming up with that idea.
Well, you've got a lot of knowledge to back that up now, though. So
yeah, like I said, it's been a huge learning curve, and I'm not the strongest coder, but as soon as I get time and consider certain things finished, you know, I am learning. I've been kind of going through Raspberry Pi stuff and getting an understanding of it and knowing what it can do. And luckily, I've got like my friend Chris. He's very patient and puts up with me asking the most basic of questions. But like I said, you know, we kind of have this relationship of he will look at the science behind things, and he's probably one of the best mathematicians I've ever come across. And we were looking at kind of, you know, your bog standard eye gimbal, up, down, left, right. And he's saying there's no way that can work because of this, because of the constraints of this. And then I'd come in the next day and I would have built it, and there it is working. Like, but it can't work. It's like
Bumblebee flying.
Yeah. So he looks at it from those points of view of, you know, all the things that I wouldn't look at it from a point of view of, you know, he's worried about blowing stuff up. I'm not bothered about blowing stuff up. You know, if I blow it up, it's a learning experience. You know, I do know what I'm doing, and I know what I'm doing with electronics and all that sort of stuff. But, you know, but the best of us have moments where you short out a battery and by accident, and it goes bang. So, yeah. You know, that's it. You kind of got to encourage people to just take that leap, and like John was saying earlier on, just start small, build something small. Having a 3D printer, you know, get a resin printer. Super cheaper than my first 3D printer. My first one cost £500. But this, it's £200. A couple of bottles of resin and a few pairs of gloves. You're getting immense quality. You can learn to design or go on Thingiverse. Just making models. Just, you know, design something small, build it, put it together. You know, it becomes so much easier to just do this stuff at home now.
What model of resin printer is it?
This one is an Elegoo Mars. Another friend actually got this model, and he sent me some Star Wars parts, and the quality was just shocking, just unbelievable. So I wanted to kind of go for the £2,000 up one straight away.
Mm-hmm.
But seeing as I had the cash for my birthday, and Amazon had this on sale for $190.
Right.
So do it. You know, it's going to be a couple of years before I can afford the next one. So yeah, you know, you just kind of get big bottles of resin like this, tip it in, wear your face mask and, you know, your safety stuff, and it's good to go. This one here inside of me, I don't know if you can see it, the red lid.
Mm-hmm.
It's currently printing the Johnny 5 head I just showed you in the picture, but 35% scale. So I'm thinking maybe when I get to do an event with Big Johnny 5, I might do a little raffle or a giveaway. So you'll get to win, you know, a mini Johnny 5, which is going to be so big. I might put some motors in there.
Nice. That's a good idea.
Might do a bit of a giveaway or something.
I've just pasted two links to there's a Pro Elegoo Mars as well as a regular one by the looks of it.
Yeah.
At £50 difference.
Yeah, the Pro one's obviously better.
Right.
Because it says Pro.
And it's 50 quid more.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't looked into it, but I'm sure, yeah, if you put Pro on things, it's got to be better.
With thumb.
This thing's, you know, it's doing the job I want it to do. I'm not having to sand anything, and yeah, we'll see how it goes. I mean, I'll probably post a couple of pictures of this finished head when it's done.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, other than that, like I say, I think you guys are following me on YouTube anyway, not YouTube, Twitter and Facebook. So I'll dump all my pictures there. And if anybody is interested in following my build specifically, I've got my own Facebook page called Rex and Johnny 5 Build.
Yes.
I basically put everything, all the events going forward, links to anything useful.
I'm frantically posting all of these links in the chat there.
I'm actually well impressed you've got them all. I would like to have gone on my phone and copied and pasted it all. So.
God bless Google.
Oh yeah, fantastic. Fantastic. Yeah, cool. I hope I've done a reasonable job.
Oh, it's been awesome. Thank you very much. Cheers.
No, great. Thank you very much for having me. Like I say, it was you know, a bit of a surprise and very different. You guys do coding and stuff.
No, it's been great. Yeah, originally, of course, I wanted you to come with the actual Johnny 5 and show us, but yeah, you did at the time say it's going to be quite hard, and it's obvious to see why.
Yeah, but you know, going forward, you know, when the world does kind of resume some kind of normality, you know, I don't know, do you guys meet up in like an evening, or is it?
Yeah, the same sort of time. It would be, you know, 6:15, 6:30 in the middle of Nottingham.
Yeah. So, you know, I mean, I'm not saying it's out of the realms of possibility that I might find myself down there one day with Johnny 5 and so.
I think there is a Nottingham Comic Con that happens every now and again, isn't there? So.
Yes, it's called EM Con.
Yeah.
I had previously been invited to that, but I do, and I can tell you that I've got a friend who's building Johnny 5. He's probably a lot earlier on in his build than I am. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's been in it for a year, maybe 5, and he's in Nottingham based.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, I can send you his information on.
Yeah, definitely.
He is attending EMCon.
All right.
So my only kind of guidance that I passed on was these things happen, you know, without using expletives. I've told many people I'm attending events, and then you know, something always happens the day before, or
coronavirus.
The mid torso on this collapsed the day before an event. Literally twisted it, buckled in two.
Oh no!
So I literally, my friend caught the top half of it, and as I said, it weighs a load. That was unexpected. You know, I wasn't expecting that the day before an event.
No.
He left. I left it as, screw this thing, but you're staying in the corner now. No, I'm not attending the event, sorry. 2 hours later, 1 million bits, reinforced with steel, and ready to go to the event. So I attended the event. Yeah, it's one of those things, but stuff happens. Same with the Night Rider car. Something always went wrong the night before I had to do, you know, a 200-mile drive to an event. So all I've said to him is, yeah, you've said that you're going to the event. Brilliant. You know, you're very early in your build, but just be prepared that, you know, stuff happens.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd rather it happened here than, you know, your robot collapses on top of a child.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, safety first is what I say.
Sounds fair.
There you go.
All right, I'm conscious we're now at 9:45, so I've kept you talking for a long time.
Oh, no, sorry.
Don't you apologise at all. It's been fantastic. Thank you. It's really great talk. So thank you so much for giving it another round of applause for that. I mean, we'll probably, as you say, if we persuade you to, when we're meeting in person again, persuade you to come down with him and we can see him in real life, that'd be fantastic as well. So do keep in touch. I'm going to keep following you on the various different ways I can follow you. And good luck with the rest of the build and the V2 and all of that. I'd be interested to see how you get on.
I'll probably do a shout out on Twitter to anybody that is interested in maybe doing some coding or developing, or it'd be fairly cool to kind of get people involved. Yeah,
definitely do that. I think Sean definitely sounds interested. I'd be interested in seeing what I could do for that as well. So yeah, sounds good.
Exploit every avenue.
Yeah, definitely, especially when they're fun.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks very much again.
No.
So thanks everybody for coming. Don't forget, I say it's the Microsoft Azure IoT special on the 17th of September. That's going to be fantastic. And .NET Knots on the 24th as well. So do join us for that. Thanks again to our speakers, Jon Skeet and Dave Stapley. They've been fantastic. And we'll see you all at next month's meetup. Thanks very much.
Cheers, guys.
See you later.
Take it easy.